Do you want to know something that I hate? All of the Muffin slander. She is one of the coolest characters in the whole show, and she gets hated on because she acts like a toddler. Well, guess what? She's a toddler. You have to realize that comparing Muffin to Bluey or Bingo is where everybody gets this wrong. We spend so much time hanging out with Bluey and Bingo that we start to think every kid in the show should act just like them. But that is a huge mistake, because Bluey is 6 and Bingo is 4. That might sound close in age to Muffin, but when you were a kid, those few years make a gigantic difference. The writers probably made Muffin to show us exactly how wild, loud, and confusing it is to be 3 years old. And this is what some people call the three-nager phase. It's a time when your brain has all these big feelings and huge ideas, but it hasn't quite figured out how to control them yet. While Bingo is old enough to stop and think about how other people feel, Muffin is running on pure energy and instinct. She isn't trying to be the bad guy in the story, she just hasn't really learned how to hit the brakes yet. When you see her screaming or running around, you aren't seeing a mean kid. You are seeing a tiny puppy who is still figuring out how the world works. We see this happen perfectly in the episode Charades. The whole problem starts because Muffin refuses to play the game the normal way. She gets this giant idea in her head that she must be a ballerina, and to be a ballerina, she absolutely needs a tutu. To us watching at home, or even to Bluey and Bingo, this looks like she is just being bossy. It looks like she is ruining the game on purpose because she wants everything to be about her. But you have to look at it from her point of view. Muffin isn't trying to hurt anyone's feelings. She's just struggling with a big idea called egocentrism. That is a fancy word that basically means she thinks the whole game and the world revolves around her. In Muffin's head, the game isn't just a game. It is a serious performance, and you cannot have a performance without the right costume. When she demands that tutu, she isn't ignoring her cousins. She is just hyper-focused on making her game perfect. The trouble happens not because she is mean, but because she truly doesn't understand that other people want to play as well. This makes it really hard for us to watch sometimes because we would never let Bluey act that way. If Bluey did that, we would call her cheeky because she's supposed to know better. But Muffin literally does not know better yet. The show is daring us to be patient with a character who is still learning the rules. We often forget that Muffin represents exactly what it's like to be at that age. The writers aren't just making a naughty character, they are showing us the real frustration of being little and wanting to do everything yourself before you actually can. This brings us to the episode Library, which I personally think offers arguably the strongest evidence that Muffin is actually a genius at observation. We always hear people say that children are like sponges who soak up everything around them, but I would argue that Muffin takes this to a whole new level. It seems like her bad behavior in this episode isn't really coming from inside her, but rather from the confusing lessons she is getting from the adults in the room. Let's look at the evidence on Uncle Stripe. The trouble really starts when he is driving and accidentally runs through a yellow light that was definitely turning red. Instead of admitting he made a mistake, he tells Muffin that it was okay because it was a special situation. Now, to us watching the show, that might just sound like a dad making a silly excuse, but I suspect Muffin heard something completely different. It looks to me like she interpreted that moment as a brand new rule. If you are special, you don't have to follow the rules. When Stripe tells her moments later that she is the most special kid in the world, you can almost see the gears turning in her head. I don't think she decides to be naughty here in the library just for the sake of it. It feels more like she's testing out this new power her dad just gave her. If her dad can break traffic rules because he is special, then surely the most special kid in the world can play however she wants. When she refuses to listen to Librarian Bluey or Bingo, she is really just mirroring the exact logic Stripe used in the car. That is why the ending of this episode is so important to my theory here. Stripe has to sit her down and explain that while she is special to her family, she isn't special to the rest of the world. And the truly amazing thing here is that Muffin actually understands what Stripe is saying. Once the rule is explained clearly, she stops the chaos immediately. This suggests to me that Muffin isn't just a chaotic force of nature. She is actually a really smart kid who is just looking for clear boundaries. It makes you wonder if the problem maybe isn't even Muffin at all, but rather the confusing instructions she gets from people raising her. And that brings us straight to the third part of this, which is Muffin's cone. This acts as a perfect counterpoint to the library situation, while Stripe gave too much freedom. I feel like Trixie might have swung a little too hard in the other direction here. We see her trying to physically block a bad habit by putting Muffin in a cone to stop her thumb sucking. It is a pretty funny visual gag, but I think the writers are doing something really clever by showing us that Trixie is struggling with her own self-control regarding chips at the exact same time. It creates this really interesting parallel where both the mother and daughter are fighting against their impulses, and it kind of suggests to me that simply blocking the behavior really doesn't teach them anything. The reason I love this episode is that it shows how much better Muffin responds to fun rather than force. When Chili steps in, she doesn't yell or add more rules. She turns the cone into a game. It seems to me that this approach works wonders because Muffin is suddenly so focused on playing that she forgets to suck her thumb entirely. The most telling moment happens right at the end when they're in the car, where Muffin starts to put her thumb in her mouth but stops herself. To me, that is such an important moment, proving that Muffin isn't just a brat. She is capable of learning self-discipline if you give her the chance to figure it out herself, instead of just putting up a wall. But if we want to talk about the ultimate proof that Muffin is just a product of her environment, I would argue that we have to look at Facey Talk. To me, this episode is so funny, and it's also some absolute chaos. It features a high-speed chase through the house that kind of feels like an action movie, but I suspect that the real conflict isn't about Muffin at all. The chaos really kicks off because Stripe and Trixie aren't on the same page. We hear them arguing about timeouts versus positive parenting. While Muffin runs wild with the tablet, it feels pretty clear to me that Muffin senses this confusion between her parents and instinctively exploits the gap in their leadership. And then the turning point is in the bathroom. This is honestly one of the most touching scenes in the show for me. When Stripe and Trixie stop arguing and finally get on the same team, the dynamic immediately shifts. It suggests that Muffin wasn't being naughty just for the thrill of it. She was reacting to the tension and lack of boundaries. As soon as her parents present a united front, she listens. This leads me to believe that Muffin is actually a really effective stress test for the adults. She forces them to become better parents because she refuses to let them get away with lazy or confused communication. So when we put all these pieces together, I tend to believe that Muffin is actually the secret hero of the show because she forces everyone to be more honest. It seems to me that we are so used to watching perfect TV families that Muffin shocks us by showing the messy, loud, and exhausting reality of what growing up actually looks like. I would argue that she isn't a villain at all, but rather a necessary challenge that pushes the adults around her to become better parents. The writers use her to prove that raising a kid is actually really hard work, and I think that makes the show feel so much more special and real than almost anything else on children's television right now. But that is just my personal theory on the psychological makeup of the healer's cousin Muffin, and I am also dying to know if you guys agree with me. I want to know if you think Muffin is a misunderstood genius, or if you still think she's just a spoiled brat who does whatever she pleases. So let me know in the comments your thoughts on that. And with that said, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology of Muffin, make sure you absolutely demolish that subscribe button so you never miss an upload. I try to upload once a week, and even more if I can, and your support is what makes it possible. But as always, cheers.
You have to remember to put Blueys in it first.
Oh, thank